All right, all right. So, college football week 2, something that was absolutely insane. There's a ton to talk about, whether it is the Texas game, the Oklahoma game, the Alabama game, Iowa State. So, there's a lot for us to get into. Let me make sure everything's coming up right. So, y'all let me know in the chat, what game do you want to start with? We have got a lot for us to talk about. We can start within the SEC, we can start within the Big 12 because there's a lot of important stuff for us to get into with both of them. All right, here we go. So we'll start, I guess, with the Alabama Mercer game. So this weekend was really interesting. Mercer, a contestant that Alabama easily should take care of. They did that, they did their thing. But it wasn't the game I think many of us were expecting, especially after how Alabama handled Miami, and especially to see the offense come out as flat as it did. That was a little bit intriguing. But I think the thing to realize here is Mercer as an offense does some interesting things. I'm not saying they're a world beater. I'm not even trying to say that they're just a super solid team. But Mercer as an offense does some really intriguing things. If you watched the game, you saw they'll shift their entire line, everybody absent the center, just to get some different looks in the running game. And so Alabama's offense definitely didn't come out as you would like, but that defense being able to handle the shifts in Mercer's front as flawlessly as they did from the get go was a reassuring sign, especially coming from last year. Where, if any of you are Alabama fans that are watching right now, last year, you'll remember the linebackers got picked on by and large last year. And so this year, seeing that kind of be fixed as soon as it is something that's really reassuring to see. That's part of the reason why I was so big on Henry To'o when he came to Alabama, was because of that communication. The communication he has is just paramount to what it is Alabama wants to do. It allows for someone such as Harris to be able to kind of free roam, do what he normally does, and that kind of maximizes the entirety of the Alabama defense because you have somebody who's completely keyed in on communication, on making sure everybody's lined up right, making sure everybody's good. And Christian Harris, being a former DB in high school, kind of gets the roam, headhunt, and play his brand of ball. So it's kind of the best of both worlds with Henry To'o there. It's the reason why, ultimately, I think, especially going into this week with Florida, I feel so good as an Alabama fan, right? Because Florida's offense is completely different than it was last year. If we even look to last year and this year, it's going to look like two completely different things. The quarterback style, completely different. And they're going to rely much more on the run. And with Dan Mullen, we can expect them to try and do some unique things to open up that run. And Henry To'o is an individual where his discipline is going to be huge, keeping him in check, keeping everybody in check. So I like that. Yeah, I can't disagree. That cut block that Mercer does, it is not what you want to see. It's something that, quite frankly, I'm not quite sure why that's still allowed in the manner that it is, especially where we have all these other rules to protect offensive players. And I can get behind it, right? Football is better when we have a guy like Will Anderson in. So, the cut block, that was a pretty dirty play. I was very glad that at least now we're hearing that Will's injury doesn't look to be super dire. I think Saban said he was day to day. So that's going to be something to see. Well, while y'all are coming in, let me know in the comments what days you want to see live streams, because ultimately on the channel, I want to start streaming twice a week. I'm thinking probably Mondays and Friday. Monday, do a recap of the weekend's games, kind of do a light preview of the games to come. Friday, really dive deep into the weekend's games, try and mix in some guests here and there. Y'all let me know what you would like as far as that goes. But leading into Florida, as long as the offensive line can get itself sorted out, I think Alabama will be perfectly fine. Florida's defense still has major question marks from me. Grantham's defense was bad last year. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how they mitigate the losses of that. I think the game that probably was the most shocking to me, not in result, but in absolute approach, was that Texas Arkansas game. And let me explain, because when I say not in result, I knew Arkansas was a solid team, right? If we just go back to what Barry Odom did last year, Barry Odom's defense last year with Arkansas was really solid. The whole Arkansas playbook right now is super cohesive. Their defensive scheme is really maximizing what they do. And so I thought it was completely logical that Arkansas could go out there and really hinder Texas. I think the thing that became so intriguing to me was seeing how effective they were at doing so. Right. I knew Arkansas could go in there and really test Texas, but it was just another thing entirely to see the effectiveness of it. All right, if you're Texas, you have to go back to the drawing board on several different areas. And today we heard that Casey Thompson is now the starter, which is absolutely wild. Right now we're hearing Casey Thompson's the starter. That's going to be a whole interesting thing we need to watch, because what does that do for Hudson Card? If Casey doesn't turn out to be the guy, now you have this dynamic where you've pulled your previous starter. It's just kind of a messy situation all around. And that's not even to begin to address the real issue of the offensive line, because the offensive line for the Longhorns got absolutely dominated. And it wasn't just relegated to the offensive line, the line of scrimmage on both sides. I mean, when you're Arkansas and you're rushing for 300 plus yards, and you don't really even have to test out Texas's secondary, because if they can't stop the run and you already have a lead, there's no reason for you to do anything else but to continue running it, right? Impose your will. By all means, keep imposing your will until they can prove that they can stop it. At the point where they can't prove they can stop it, that's what we saw in that Arkansas-Texas game. Arkansas's offensive line won the battle of physicality. The defensive line won the battle of physicality. And then if I even flip it, right, I tweeted this out during the game that Arkansas completely won every phase of that game, whether we're talking the coaching, whether we're talking defense, offense, special teams. There really wasn't a phase of that game where they didn't win. But at the end of the day, I don't know for Texas the ultimate fix here, because it's easy to just switch your quarterback, and maybe that will help. I'm definitely not discounting that will help, but the offensive line really, really, really struggled. And when your offensive line struggles like that, it's going to be hard for any quarterback to ultimately succeed there. And I mean, look, they have one of the best running backs in the nation in Bijan Robinson, and he couldn't get anything going because Arkansas was all over him. Arkansas played their brand of football and didn't allow Texas to play their brand of football. I mean, they just got outmuscled. It's really interesting watching that game back, right? Because it's very few times people who just, it's very few times you can watch a game and see a team such as Arkansas be so successful at stopping a run without blitzing. I mean, I can maybe count on definitely both hands how many times I've seen a team be that effective at stopping the run without blitzing, or without blitzing at a large degree. I mean, Arkansas, for a good portion of that game, was in a 3-man front, a 5-man box. They didn't feel the need to load the box, and when they did, the net result was all the same. With a 3-man front, 5 in the box, they were more than successful at not only hindering the run game, but also dictating the pass game, getting Hudson Card off of his spot, making him make decisions on the run, keeping him uneasy. And ultimately, when you only have 5 in the box, you have all those guys back in coverage, right? So if your line can't protect a 3-man rush and then there's everybody else in coverage, you're going to have a hard time throwing the ball, a really, really hard time. And Texas did. I mean, what was Card's stats? Like something 7 of 15, something like that. It was just incredible at the end of the game how effective a 3-man front was. 8 for 15, I'm sorry, with a QBR of 14.9. And the crazy thing is last week, if y'all tuned into the stream, we were getting after UCLA's quarterback for a QBR of like a 13. And Hudson Card posts a QBR of 14.9. And the large portion of that is on the offensive line. Now, make no mistake, I'm not saying there were times where he didn't have a clean-ish pocket and have the ability to make a play and then got a little bit happy feet. That happens, right? Especially in a game where he's already feeling so much pressure. Quarterbacks tend to do that, right? He's feeling a bunch of pressure. He knows he doesn't have a stable platform as far as the offensive line is concerned. So he's moving from his spot, getting out and open, trying to make something happen. And it becomes so habit formed that to the point where sometimes you do have that offensive line giving you some sort of protection, you might be more inclined to bail. And it's just because of the habit, right? I mean, it's something we've seen before, but if you were to tell me, right, that a Texas quarterback under Steve Sarkisian with Bijan Robinson, and then they do have some talented guys at wide receiver, whether we're talking Worthy, Whittington, Worthy can take the top off of a defense, right? He's got elite speed. Whittington is a former top level recruit. If you were to tell me that all that right there with Steve Sarkisian as the head coach and your quarterback would have only had 61 yards, man, that's rough. That's rough. Now, ultimately, we know now Casey Thompson will be the quarterback against Rice this week. That's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. Casey Thompson, 5 of 8, 57 yards, a QBR of 98.6. But at that point, I mean, the game was out of hand, right? Arkansas was just simply hanging on to their lead, running out the clock. It was a really tough point for them to come back, not something that you expect them to. So Texas, I mean, they have a lot to work on, especially if we're talking about Texas before they come into the SEC. Because I know that there's some fans from the Big 12, and they'll point out that, oh, well, the SEC schedule doesn't consist of Alabama, then LSU, then Auburn, then Georgia in back-to-back weeks. And you might be right about that, right? Like that is true. But at the same time, you might have A&M, you might have Arkansas, you might have LSU, then you have, some FCS school, and then you go into Auburn, Alabama. It's a grind. It is an absolute grind. And the part that isn't really talked about is you're so worn down by mid portion of the season because of the physicality of the league, just the way the league is played in the SEC, that it makes the back end of the schedule so difficult. And that's what I was talking about the other day. If y'all watched the video where I was talking about OU, and then subsequently before that, the rat poison video, right? That's what I meant when I said I'd much rather Nick Saban have this rant now, get this out the way now, than when we get into the actual meat and bones of the SEC schedule, the absolute grind, because it is a grind through and through. So Texas has got to go back to the drawing board. They got a lot to work on before they get into the SEC. And it really draws attention to, if we want to talk recruiting for the Longhorns, they've got to win on some top-level offensive linemen. They've been doing a really solid job on the defensive line, getting some guys that are really talented, no doubt about it. But you have got to win on the offensive line. I mean, you have got to win on the offensive line recruiting right now, because they really struggled. And it's going to be much easier if you want to get in a top-level quarterback, if you're going to have offensive line, to be able to show them that, hey, we actually plan on putting something around you, a wall around you to protect you. Other than that, man, they got to go back to the drawing board. So I'm really interested in that game. I'm interested in how Texas is going to rebound. I'm interested in how Arkansas is going to look this year. I don't know if y'all watch too much Quarterback Spotlight. I talked to him quite a bit. Really good dude. Y'all should check his channel out. But he's been telling me that he thinks the upside of KJ Jefferson's real high. I mean, he's been really high on Arkansas and their ceiling for quite some time. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Arkansas progresses throughout the season. But, I mean, comment down below. I'm interested. When was the last time Arkansas won a game that big, a top 15 victory? Because Arkansas has had some really down years here recently. And it's been coming together. It absolutely has. But that was a big win, right? Texas, whether they were overrated or not coming into that game, that was a huge win for Arkansas. Hats off to the Razorbacks. That's awesome for the fans, awesome for the SEC, awesome for college football, really, to get that kind of game, right? A big team like Texas at Arkansas, everybody in college football wins. The Big 12 wins a little less, but everybody in college football wins. So outside of them, the game that was just, had all the eyes of college football on it, Oregon, Ohio State. Oregon, Ohio State was such an exciting game to watch. I was really hoping we'd get Kayvon Thibodeau, Justin Flo. If y'all have never seen Justin Flo's high school highlights, go watch it, because I'm surprised he didn't catch a few charges in high school for how physical he was. I mean, he was unbelievably physical at the inside linebacker position. A ton of fun to watch. Shouldn't have been in the game at that point anyways. Yeah, Bobby, I agree. I can't disagree there. It's always hard though, because especially with Florida next week, you want to continue getting as much base level formation practices against an opponent as you can, right? For Will Anderson, especially being on the field with Drew Sanders, you want to get that relationship going with, Toto doing the call outs. And I understand you can do that in practice. There's no doubt about that. But you really can't simulate the feel, the drive, the environment of a game, right? You can't. You can try, you can get close, but the game is a little bit different. You're going to ultimately see some things that you wouldn't otherwise see in practice. So it's always tough, but I find it hard to disagree with that. It was a really cheap play on Anderson, and that's coming from me. I don't usually call stuff like that out. I usually just leave that be. That was cheap. 1S3 between lines. I was going to start both quarterbacks at the same time. Yeah, Da Vinci, I don't know if you remember way back in like March or April, I did a video with Quarterback Spotlight, just talked about him. And we were talking about how we didn't think that the gap between Emory Jones and Anthony Richardson was as large as it was being made out to be. I get it. Emory Jones has been in the program for a long time. He's got a high ceiling. He does, right? Dual threat guy, athletic kid. He's got a good ceiling on him. But when I look at it, right, I'm looking at the difference between a guy who's been there and has failed to really capture the job as opposed to a really, really athletic kid in Anthony Richardson. And if the distance between them isn't that far and one of them's been in the system a long time, that to me was an indication that, man, Anthony Richardson, Mullen must see something in him that he really likes. He's an athletic kid. We've seen that in the 2 games. I don't disagree, though. We're going to be seeing some really interesting things from Florida. And that's why I said in the beginning, I know that they're completely different teams, and I am in no way trying to really compare these two. But that's why I'm glad that Bama had Mercer before the Florida game, because Mercer does all those intriguing things up front with the offensive line to try and spring the running game. Mercer's not a good team. We know this, right? But they put up close to 500 rushing yards the week before Alabama. So when you have a team that has that effectiveness running the ball, and then they do all that eye candy to try and spring the run free, the ability to be able to be disciplined is going to be huge. And that discipline is what I'm really happy that they got to really drill in with an unconventional look. But I completely agree, Da Vinci. Chris, my man, what's up? Big Ten, Ohio State or the field? The field at this point. Look, Ohio State is still Ohio State. They have good coaching. They've got really good talent. But that defense is just not very good. It's just not, right? And I try and be as optimistic as possible, but I have to be real at the same time. And so many times, right, I'll offer you a positive in the negative, right? And I'll say, well, this right here is bad, sure, but let's focus on this because this is something we can move forward with. If you're Ohio State, you have to move forward knowing with your defense isn't very good. And I don't know where you go from there. And offensively, you have so much talent. I mean, so much talent on that offense. The wide receivers, they're solid. They're super solid. Stroud, I mean, look, he was a really highly touted recruit. When you look at his stat line, kid put up 484 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception against Oregon. But somehow the offense just doesn't look right for Ohio State. Like when you look at the end of the game and you're looking at all these numbers, you wouldn't attach those numbers to the game you just watched. And to be honest, I'm going to have to really do some digging. I'm going to have to really rewatch. I don't think that they have a clear-cut identity on offense. Yeah, Bobby, I agree. And the unwillingness to change was unbelievable against Oregon. Oregon was taking that defensive formation that Ohio State wanted to try and stay in to town all game long. And the unwillingness to change was really surprising. Really surprising. And Da Vinci, I don't disagree there either. It's really strange. It's really strange for Ohio State right now. It's almost tough to put your finger on because you can't just sit there, if we're speaking specifically about the offense right now, and say, oh, well, the offense is just bad. It's not. It's not, right? Like, it's just not. But it's just not looking right. It's just not clicking the way it should. Stroud's missing high a lot. And that right there is going to be very interesting. I want to get on quarterback spotlight here soon. He and I were texting about it. And, he pointed out that he thinks that it's the release that Stroud is really struggling with right now. He's not timing it right. So I really want to talk to him. Brilliant guy. I mean, seriously, y'all, brilliant guy at breaking down the quarterback position. Works with a lot of dudes, right? He works with a lot of dudes. He knows what he's talking about. And he and I were talking about Stroud. It's just not, he's not doing bad, right? I mean, I cannot say that a kid who threw for almost 500 yards is just doing bad. It's just not coming together. It's just not. Bobby says Oregon ran 3 plays on offense and still had success. You're not wrong. You're definitely not. And it's the same thing, right? I talked about with UCLA. Let me get this right here. I have all my stats in a little notebook. It's the same thing I talked about with that UCLA LSU game. You cannot give up almost a first down, a pop every time the other team touches the ball on offense, if the other team is running, and expect to win that game. CJ Verdell averaged 8.1 yards per carry. Anthony Brown averaged 6.5. Travis Dye averaged 5.4 for a total of 7.1 yards per carry. You're going to be in for such a miserable day if you can't stop the run. Right? Your chance of winning, if you cannot stop the run, or at least you struggle to stop the run to that degree, is greatly diminished. It's greatly diminished because you allow the offense to play their game, right? You allow the offense to play their game. You have to keep your defense on the field. It's already struggling longer and longer and longer, and they're not going to be getting any rest. The offense is rearing, ready to go. They have momentum. They want to prove something. It's just a recipe for disaster. Look, at the end of the day, like I said, it is still Ohio State, but that's why I don't know how many of you saw the video I did earlier when I was ranking the teams. I can't in good conscience put Ohio State above Penn State right now. Penn State has the ranked win, right? So I cannot in good conscience put Ohio State above Penn State right now. Says it kind of reminds me of how Smitty ran through the defense last year in the Natty. Yeah, look, I absolutely. But, I think as an Alabama fan, one of the best displays of this, and it's going to be a little bit hyperbolic because of who the individual I'm about to name is, and y'all will get it. My man, thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate that. Chris with the 10. Yeah, we'll hit that Texas-Arkansas game here in a bit, but the guy I was about to say, it really reminds me of like Derrick Henry when he was at Alabama. We would just run the ball so many times. And then come the fourth quarter, you don't want to hit him anymore. He still wants to go, and you don't want to hit him anymore. And all Alabama wants to do is continue running it down your throat. And the defense, they're tired. I mean, they don't want to get hit anymore. And if you can impose your will through the running game, it's wild. Chris, you were 100% right about the Arkansas game. It was a game that I thought that many people would overlook. I think Texas absolutely overlooked it. I don't know how Texas overlooked them, but they absolutely did. And it's a travesty. It is, because they got beat at the point of attack, both sides of the ball. And not only that, but Arkansas, kind of the exact same thing I was just talking about with this Oregon-Ohio State game. That same logic carries over, right? And Texas defense couldn't stop Arkansas running the ball. But at the point where Arkansas is winning the game by running the ball, they're controlling the clock, right? They know that they can get a first down simply by running the football because they're just dominating the point of attack. They're getting it. Boom, boom, boom. So you know that you can control the time of possession. You can control all of that. The Texas defense just has to stay on the field. The Texas offense has to stay on the sideline. And that's ultimately what was so crazy to me about, I'm in no way questioning play calling. I'm sitting here. I'm not an offensive coordinator. But it's because of the way that Texas's offensive line struggled so bad. There was a key moment in the third quarter where the game was still in distance. Arkansas had a solid lead, but technically speaking, the game is still well within distance. And I talked about it in the video. The play calling was deep shot, which missed, deep shot, which missed. And now you're in a third, I think it was like it was a 3rd and 10. Yeah. So you're in a 3rd and 10. You haven't been able to move the ball with any consistency all day. Your offensive line isn't giving Hudson Card any time at all. If they do give him time, right, there's a good chance that Hudson Card's going to bail from the pocket anyways, simply because he's shell shocked from Arkansas dominating the line. Arkansas is able to dominate the line while having 5 in the box. And who knows if they're going to bring 5? They could only bring 3, and they're being successful at it. So if you're a Texas fan, look, I'm not trying to pile on you because there's a lot to take from this game, a lot to learn. And I always say it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. But Chris, if you'll remember, this is why I kind of had that debate with you when I was on your podcast. And I said, I think that you, and I forget it was who you said you'd talk to about Texas. And you said that you thought that, with the expectations they had, they could go farther and like they should go farther based on the hype they had. And someone else said that they felt like based on the hype Texas had, they should make it to the Big 12 championship. And I sat there and I said, I don't think that either of those is where they'll be. They could make the Big 12 championship. I think there's a path, but I don't think it would really be an indication of where Texas is relative to where the Big 12 is, if that makes any sense, if Texas was to make the Big 12 championship. Whereas I think it's much more likely that they drop a few games this year, right? The offensive line just isn't where we thought it was. The quarterback situation right now is not where we think it is at all, right? And that's evident with Casey Thompson coming in. So that now you really start over. I mean, I talked about that earlier. Now you really start over there. That's not going to be a good situation at all. Look, ultimately, I want teams to be good that make college football good. Right. And whether you love, hate, or indifferent about the Texas Longhorns, it's at least more interesting when they're good. Right. Like it adds something. And so I want all teams to be able to perform at the highest level they can. It makes college football better. But they got a lot to come back to the drawing board. Da Vinci asked, are the 2 stud linebackers out for Bama this weekend? So Allen's done for the year. That's just, sickening. It is. That's just sickening. He's done for the year. On a play that, if you watch the replay, you might watch it 100 times on Allen's injury. And the only thing I can think of is he got stepped on. I haven't seen for sure if that's where the break happened, but it looked like a Miami player accidentally stepped backwards and stepped on him. It's just so unfortunate. So unfortunate for him. Will Anderson, like Bobby said, they seem to be day-to-day with him. And so I hope he'll play in the Florida game. God knows I hope he plays in the Florida game. Drew Sanders looked good in pass sets. He looked good rushing the quarterback. We need to have some work in the run sets, but hey, it's your first start. You know what I mean? And what did I say about Mercer, right? I'm not saying they're a world beater. Please do not get that misunderstood. Is Clay Helton really out at USC right now? Is that for real? Hold on. Because that's wild. Like, that changes a lot. Yeah, if Clay Helton's out at USC, that's crazy. Yeah, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. I'm looking that up right now. But I'm sorry to have a pause like this. I know that must be a little bit awkward, but I'm having to look this up. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it looks like Clay Helton's out. So this is huge. That's big. And how can you blame them? Look, and one of the things I've been talking about related to USC, they've been recruiting well. They have. You get the number 1 player, what was it, last year in the cycle? You get him coming in. Then you back it up with another 5-star defensive tackle. This year you got Damani Jackson, a part of your class. Top-rated cornerback, 5-star. And now the interesting thing is with Helton out, now you have instability at USC. And they were in a lot of big battles for recruiting, right? They had been doing some solid work on the trail. They brought in some guys from Texas to keep a strangle in Texas, trying to make sure they get good recruits from the state of Texas. And so now you have instability at a program that was in a lot of top recruiting battles. Chris is a OU fan, right? They were in a tough battle, OU, with USC for Gentry Williams. I'm not saying that battle's done, but that instability, it definitely puts a card in OU's back pocket, right? Alabama's trying to flip Damani Jackson. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. But, right? I mean, one has a head coach and a direction right now, and the other doesn't. Knock on wood, but that's huge. That's wild. And to do it in the middle of the season, that's crazy. I don't disagree. I don't disagree with the move. I mean, he hasn't been great. I was really hoping they could get it together, but to do it in the middle of the middle of the season, I say, right in the beginning portion of the season, that's just incredible. Whew. That's wild. That's actually wild. Yeah, Firmus Paradox, you said it too. Clay Helton fired. Wow. That's that's crazy. That's actually wild. Good looking up, y'all. That's so a game I actually want to hear from y'all on this game. Texas A&M Colorado. What are we thinking about Texas A&M? Because there was a lot of hype about Texas A&M coming into this year, and I get it, right? I understand why there was hype about Texas A&M coming into this year. They finished last year great. Only loss was to the national champion. Looked pretty darn good throughout your year. The thing I always talked about with Texas A&M, though, is it's one thing to replace a quarterback. That's tough, especially in modern era college football with so much, right? So much is always ran through the quarterback position. That sounds crazy, dumb, but especially with how modern offenses are run now, right? I think y'all get what I'm meaning when I say that. You just put so much emphasis on that quarterback position. So replacing a vet is already tough in Kellen Mond. That's already going to be a tough ask. But now you have a quarterback battle get drawn out throughout the summer. You have a situation where now Haynes King, the guy who won the starting job, gets injured. Zach Calzada comes off the bench, 18 of 38 for 183 yards, 1 touchdown. But that 1 touchdown, hey, say what you want about only having 1 touchdown. At least when the touchdown mattered, he got it. That's, props to that, because when they needed it, he got it. And at the end of the day, it was a good win for A&M against Colorado, especially how they won at the last second. And you could see there were plays that happened in that game where the team was really rallying around Calzada, which is a positive thing to see. But if y'all will remember, my greatest concern for A&M wasn't the quarterback. It wasn't. It's always tough to replace a quarterback. My greatest concern for A&M was replacing that offensive line in combination with a quarterback, right? Because it's one thing to replace that quarterback, but if you have an experienced offensive line, they can really mitigate that loss, giving him time, helping him out. The center can identify blitzes. They can really help out. You got to replace your offensive line and a quarterback that, oh, by the way, ranks in the history books of Texas A&M and Kellen Mond. That's a tough ask. That is genuinely a tough ask. Everybody always talked about replacing Kellen Mond, and rightfully so, right? I'm not trying to take away from that. I'm truly not. But I was always surprised that so little conversation was being had about replacing that offensive line, right? Maybe that's because I am an Alabama fan and it's just kind of like drilled into us that the offensive line is king, paramount, this. But I was really intrigued as to how that was going to go. It's still very early days for A&M, but they've really struggled so far. I mean, they've really, really struggled. Bobby says Damani Jackson and Denver Harris at Bama. Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be awesome. If Bama could get both of those guys, that would be incredible. And look, when we're talking recruiting, just a little side pivot into recruiting right now, that move for USC is going to ripple effect throughout college football. It's going to be really interesting to see how this goes. It's going to be really something to keep an eye on because there are so many different teams where USC is in a battle with them for a prospect that your fan base really wants. And now they don't have direction at the head. That's going to be interesting. Da Vinci asks, are you concerned with Bama's offensive line? I would be if they were playing Georgia this week. Yeah, I would be. And look, the reason why I pose it in that way is because in the long haul, I'm not too terribly concerned about the offensive line. Doug Marrone is a guy who I have faith in him when it comes to coaching the offensive line. If you look in the room, there's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of talent in that offensive line room. But I would be remiss if I said that I wasn't surprised at how flat they came out against Mercer. Because anything I can compliment Mercer on is something they do unique in their offensive scheme. And I'm certainly not saying, Mercer is just a bad team. That's not my point here. It's a team that Alabama easily should handle, no doubt about that. But I mean, they got really worked on some basic things, right? I mean, I wrote down in my notes. I don't have my notebook here with me. My girlfriend has it. We split the laptop actually, but I have down in my laptop that there were times where it was just a basic speed rush, beating the right tackle, right? Even sometimes in the run games, things didn't get finished. But kind of like I was saying for A&M, when you're replacing a new offensive line, a lot of moving parts are going this way, that way, especially when during the game they made a change at the offensive line. And ultimately, I think the offensive line will come together. It's just a good thing we're not playing someone with a defensive front like Georgia. Now, I say that, and there really seems to be only a handful of defensive fronts like Georgia. So, take that with what you will. But this really points the picture. One, I see that first and foremost, this is why, not solely why, but this is one of the reasons why I was so adamant Bryce Young was going to win this job, because I thought that the offensive line would be at a bit of a work in progress. Still very high on it, no doubt about it. I mean, you look right now, and I've said this multiple times, I think Alabama just signed the best offensive line class in history. Think about that. They got 2 top 5 players in the nation, both at the offensive tackle position, the number 2 center in the nation and the number 2 guard in the nation, in the same class. They replaced an entire offensive line. And then in this class, they have Tyler Booker, who's really, really good. I mean, he is good, really, really good. So I do have a little bit of concern with the offensive line, but it's nothing where I'm like hitting the panic button. It's nothing like that. I'm still questioning Grantham's defense. Although, just talking about last year from Florida, Florida's defense was a bit better last year, at least making a quarterback somewhat uncomfortable. But I mean, I say that reaching, right? Florida's defense wasn't very good last year. I don't think that Florida's defense was very good last year. I think they have a long way to go this year. And so am I concerned about it? Yes, I'm not too terribly concerned about it in the Florida game, although it definitely needs to be better than it was against Mercer. There's no doubt about that. Someone said Damani Denver and Earl Little Jr. is a crazy trio. Yo, if that happens, we're going to have an awesome live stream. Look, if I had to pick my 3 corners in this class that I would take in a heartbeat, those are the 3. Regardless of stars, Earl Little Jr. is a dude. He is a dude. I don't know how he's not a 5-star. He goes up against a 5-star receiver all the time in practice. I mean, this dude practices against the best. He's coached by a really solid coaching staff. Earl Little Jr. is really, really good. He's a guy that Bama would love nothing more than to get into this class. They're going to continue working to get him into this class. And if they're able to get any combination of Denver, Earl Little, Denver, Damani, Earl Little, I mean, Bama fans ride off into the sunset, right? Especially when you look at what's in the class of 23 in the state of Alabama. I'm not saying that you land every top prospect in your state, but you certainly have a higher propensity chance to land a top prospect that is in your state. And the state of Alabama is loaded in 2023. I mean, look at the top rankings. It's loaded in 2023. Absolutely loaded. So, I mean, the next 2 years, Bama recruiting is lining up to be very, very good, but I would love nothing more than Earl Little. Nothing more. You said O-line is the hardest thing to replace on a team because, yeah, 5 guys working together, and especially if your center's gone, right? And Alabama right now is in a position where Owens had the starting experience at center in really key games last year, into the playoffs and the national championship, and now he's bumped out to tackle. I'm sorry, this year. And so Dalcourt's a great talent, right? He's going to be good. He's going to be good. I'm not doubting that. But you got to learn, right? And especially with, it's Bama's offense, but they're trying to do some new wrinkles. They're not showing a lot against Mercer. Why would you? Not with Florida next week. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I think that's why some people said that, and even Nick was saying that Alabama wasn't spectacular in the second half against Miami. It's because you're not reaching into your bag of tricks. Why would you? You have the game in hand. Go out there, handle your business, play disciplined football, and work on some stuff. But you don't dig into your bag of tricks, not in that situation. Certainly not in that situation. Damani, yeah. Earl Little. Do I see BC getting ranked at the end of the year? I've always had a little bit of a soft spot for BC. I'm not going to lie to you. I toured the campus when I was really young. I've always had a bit of a soft spot for them. I would love nothing more than for someone in the ACC to do something. Because when we're talking about Clemson, and I said this the other day, Clemson is in a really bad spot right now. They still are a good team. They have all the talent you could ask for. But when you're looking at the ACC right now, where are you pointing to for their win that's just going to be their staple win at the end of the season to really push them over the edge? You were hoping that it would come in the ACC championship against a North Carolina or against a Miami. That doesn't look to be the case anymore. Or at least in North Carolina's case, they dropped a game they should have had no business dropping, albeit against a team that was probably better than some people expected, or at least played a heck of a game, an inspired game. I mean, college football has been sensational this year, guys. What more can we say there? I would love nothing more than for BC to be good. I'd love nothing more than for someone in the ACC to really challenge Clemson. Because every year, is it going to be Miami? Is it going to be North Carolina? And year after year, it's Dabo at the end of the day, right? There's nobody in the ACC that can really just take it to them on a consistent basis, that is, right? I know that they got beat a few years ago, but not on a consistent basis. Da Vinci says, I think Mullen's going to bring the old playbook from Tebow and Dak with an RPO. Yeah, that's why Da Vinci at the beginning, I said I'm certainly not comparing the two offenses because they're very, very different. So I'm not comparing Mercer and Florida's offense. They are dynamically different beasts. The thing I am saying, though, is what Mercer does is require you to have discipline because they do so much little eye candy to try and spring open a run. And at the end of the day, that discipline, especially being tested in that way before Florida, I think is a net positive. I think it's a net positive. But it is Mullen, and we know we are going to see something interesting from Mullen. It's just what he does. How you think about Bama this year? What problem do they have now? Look, Alabama, first off, the rat poison rant is legit. We saw that in the first quarter against Mercer, and the defense is fantastic. The defense is playing fly to the ball football. I mean, Henry To'o is communicating well. He's flying to the football. That's a match made in heaven. And he looks great in a Crimson Tide uniform. I'm so happy he's there. Offensively, it's still a unit that's going to grow, right? It's still a unit that's going to grow. They, along with every other team in the nation, have weaknesses right now, right? It's just about trying to mitigate those weaknesses with what you do. And luckily for Alabama, if we're really pointing right now to a weaker area, the offensive line is still getting things situated. And as we've been talking about, there are so many different ways we could go with the offensive line, right? There's so many different ways. I saw it earlier. I didn't get to it. Someone commented about Latham at the right tackle. Kid's a freak. I mean, the J.C. Latham's a freak. Brockermeyer is going to be great. There's so many different pieces we could do along the offensive line, but you're replacing three guys. Two, depending if you were to have Owens at center, because you get the continuity at starting there, but it's still a unit where you're replacing a lot. Luckily for Bama, you have Bryce Young, who's a literal wizard out the pocket, right? I tried to tell people that. that this kid is different. Right? Like he does not run the ball to run the football. This kid is different. He's using his legs to truly spring open the pass game. And so that right there really, really, really helps out Alabama being able to have a quarterback right now where even if your offensive line isn't really coming together in the way that you would like, and there are still growing pains, I shouldn't say coming together in the way you would like. That's a little bit harsh. It's only week 2. It's a lot of new faces. New stuff is happening, right? New quarterback, new everything on offense. So I'm being a little harsh right now, but to answer the question, yeah, I mean, they do have problems. Every team has problems. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to harp on Alabama, say, oh, this is bad, this is, but to answer the question, every team in the nation has problems. I just think the top teams in the nation right now, when we look at them, they have ways to mitigate those problems better than the teams thereafter, right? Like, that's my problem with Ohio State. You can't stop the run. I just, I don't know what you do if you cannot stop the run to that degree. I just don't know what you do. So there's a Miami fan that tweets Earl Little every day about complaining about how he's looking at Bama more than Miami. It's, man, people are weird when it comes to recruiting. People are really weird when it comes to recruiting. At the end of the day, we need to remember these are kids. You know, like there are kids I want it to come to Alabama because I'm an Alabama fan. But at the end of the day, I want these kids to make the best decision for them, because one of the things I will always kind of remember is, you know, I come from a town doesn't have a whole lot of opportunity. It's a little bit hard to get out of the town. Not many people really go to college outside that town. It's just kind of one of those small Texas towns, right? It is what it is. But when we had two guys get recruited for football in my class, they ultimately ended up being very successful in college football, both of them doing stints in the NFL. That reverberated in the town, right? It absolutely reverberated, and it actually created hope. Now, I'm not saying every case is the same, but no matter where those kids went, they created hope for a town behind them where the next year more kids went to college, whether it was for academics, whether it was for football, whether it was for basketball, it didn't matter, because now there was a belief that we can actually do something greater than just be trapped here. And so that's really why I love recruiting the way I do, because it creates opportunities for everybody's favorite teams. It creates opportunities for the individual. It's something that really replicates a success story, right? It's always a feel good story. So people are weird when it comes to recruiting. We got to remember these are kids. And at the end of the day, you know, they're trying to make the best decision. They have so many people in their ears. I just don't, I'll never get that. Like grown men, grown adults in 17 and 18-year-olds DMs and hitting them up on Twitter. And in this case, hitting up the dad. Like, what's the dad going to do? You know what I mean? Like, if you think, if you're a fan of X team, right? Because we don't even need to name a team. If you're a fan of X team, do you really think that tweeting that kid's dad every day is going to increase your chance? It's going to piss him off. It's going to put a bad taste in his mouth. Let's just be, you know, honest about it. So I don't really get that. Someone said Matt Campbell to USC. Honestly, USC, I don't know who they should hire, but that wouldn't be a bad one, right? That wouldn't be a bad one. That's actually something I'm really interested to sit down and think about. I want y'all actually to start typing in where y'all think USC should look, because that's interesting, chicken. Like I actually like that a lot. You need someone who can capitalize on what it is you have there. I need y'all to realize this for a second. When we're talking about high school talent right now, spread around college football, I'm sorry. Ohio State has a California quarterback. Clemson has a California quarterback. Alabama has a California quarterback. Ole Miss has a California quarterback. And Georgia, when JT Daniels is there, has a California quarterback. All those guys got away from USC. And I'm not, you know, Slovis has upside. Slovis has upside. Luke Fickell. Hey, everybody's saying Luke Fickell in the chat. Sam Squinch, Dara. I like that. I really like that. I really do. I think that's a good one. You know what? And you're going to think I'm crazy, but God, his name escapes me right now. I can't believe his name escapes me right now. But Luke Fickell would be a good one. But at the end of the day, you got to get somebody that's going to inspire California kids to want to come to USC. You have one of the biggest brands. Your marketability is through the roof in an era where there's NIL. You can capitalize so much. Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze is the name I was thinking. I know he's got a crazy past, but the man knows what he's doing in a way that's really intriguing to see on a weekly basis. He's a really intriguing coach. He's someone who I'm wondering and waiting for when Hugh Freeze will get their next coach. But Luke Fickell, I like Lane Kiffin to go back to USC. That'd be really interesting, actually. I mean, Lane has got a pretty good thing going right now at Ole Miss. I'm sorry. Yeah, I like that. Bobby says Bryce Young is special. The swamp should only be loud for the first 5 minutes if the game comes out and play. Yeah, I agree. Join him at OU. Kevin says maybe Gentry can convince Jackson to join him at OU. Now, hey, if OU could pull Damani Jackson, that'd be fantastic for OU. They're going to be fighting a lot of teams for that kid. I mean, he's really, really good. He's really, really good. Thoughts on Clay Helton? It's crazy, right? Like it's wild that in the middle of a season, I say the middle. I keep saying the middle like we're not in week 3. It's crazy by week 3 you have no head coach on a team that was in so many high-level recruiting battles. That's wild to me, right? Like they must have been near this move beforehand. That's really what this tells me, is that they were thinking about this beforehand. This was just the straw that broke the camel's back. So that's wild. Yeah, Weston, I agree. OU looked great against WCU, and I made that video. And look, I said it was a statement win, halfway facetiously because of the video I'd put out before saying how OU came out slow against Tulane, and they just needed to show that they can approach the game with passion against an opponent that they should work for 4 quarters. Whether it was the starters, whether it was the backups, whether it was the third string, I don't care. Just show up and don't underestimate them. And they did. And that's what I meant when I said it was a statement. In no way am I saying that, oh, that makes them the world beater, this, that, or the other. It was WCU. At the end of the day, you beat a team you should beat, but you looked darn good doing it. And you didn't have the problems you had week 1. So that is something. Luke Fickle, I agree. Da Vinci says, I'm a little concerned with Bryce Young ball control. Miami gave him a little problem. UF will definitely be deafening. Nick's got to wake up when he went there for the first time. What do you mean when you say ball control? Do you mean like when he escapes the pocket, holding it a little bit loose, or just propensity to try and throw interceptions? Let me know down in the chat, Da Vinci, and we'll circle around back to that because I'm actually interested in that. Texas would be 2-0 if they started Casey Thompson at quarterback. That's tough, Sean, because here's the thing. You had a guy in Hudson Card that people around the program have said he's looked better. Right? Whether it was by a little or a lot, they've said he's looked better in practice, right? That's just the truth of the matter. And I'm not discounting Casey. Casey looked fantastic in the bowl game at Colorado, played a hell of a game against Colorado, looked really, really good. And he came in there and played inspired football yesterday. But the reason why, ultimately, I don't know if I can agree with that is because Texas couldn't run the football. And I know that the easy thing to say is, oh, well, if they were able to move the ball through the air, it would have been easier. They couldn't run against a 3-man front. Arkansas would put 5 in the box, and Texas couldn't run against it, right? At the end of the day, I don't know that Casey Thompson would have made a difference in the W column because Texas couldn't win the battle of physicality, I should say, offensively or defensively. They couldn't stop the run. If you can't stop the run, you're allowing the team to control the pace of the game. You're allowing the team to dictate the game, and you're allowing the team to just absolutely exhaust your offense. So I get it, right? Like it's, would they have fared better with Casey Thompson? Probably, maybe, right? I don't even want to say probably because that's revisionist history, right? And I don't really like playing that game because we can ask what ifs and do this game all day long. But based on what we saw at the end, I definitely wouldn't disagree with you that they would look better. Just some kids just no. You look, hey. To your point, some kids just aren't good practice players, or some kids look really, really good in practice, and they just aren't that way during the game. You are 100% right there. I don't absolutely. That's 100% right there. The thing for me though is at the end of the game, you're having Arkansas average 7.1 yards a rush. Well, that's ESPN right there. So that's why I say it's hard for me to say Casey would have been the ultimate factor in that game when you couldn't stop the run and you couldn't get the run going. Arkansas was able to drop 6 guys in coverage a lot of the times. And, when you're able to do that, you're going to have a really hard day. You're going to have a really hard day. Really hard. Like Weston said, Casey Thompson can't fix all their problems. I agree with that. Would it have been better? Probably. It definitely probably would have been better. But I just don't think that it would have resulted in the way that maybe some would expect, because at the end of the day, they couldn't stop Arkansas running. So at the point where Arkansas gets up at all, Like they can just control the clock from there on out. Because if you're running 7.1 yards a pop, why would you do anything else? I mean, it's just crazy, right? I've never seen that. I've never seen, and this year we've seen that a lot. UCLA ran all over LSU and Edo. Oregon ran all over Ohio State, all over them, all over them. And we see time and time again, if you have that happen, you can be so talented. We look at LSU, right? You look at the 5 stars, look at the blue chip prospects on LSU's roster. I mean, from where I'm sitting right now, I could throw a rock and hit a 5-star at LSU. They got that many of them. You shake a stick, you see one at LSU. They got that many of them, right? They recruit with the best of them. I mean, top 7 classes perennially. They got worked at the line of scrimmage. It is so hard to win if you can't win the battle up front. It is so hard to win. So hard to win. KPX said USC loves to fire its coaches midseason. Yeah. Didn't they leave Lane Kiffin at the tarmac or something? Wild. Something like that? Yeah. Someone commented down. I think they left Lane Kiffin just at the tarmac. Tulane killed their opponent and Miami squeaked by. It's still way early, and we still don't know for sure how Bama and OU will be. I hope it's still... Bobby, you're not wrong, right? Tulane definitely killed their other opponent. Here's what I will say. The opponent Tulane played this past weekend, they scored their first points in week 2. They got beat 31-0 the week before. They're really not a good team. App State is a team that's been handling business in week 1 and week 2 this year. App State looks pretty darn good. Certainly not an excuse for Miami. You're Miami. They need to go out there and handle business. They still don't look very good. I'm not giving that excuse, but App State's a good team, and Tulane is much better than we thought. Tulane is a much better team than we thought, and that's why at the end of the day, I cannot wait. Absolutely cannot wait for that Tulane Ole Miss game. That's gonna be great. That's gonna be great. Bobby says Sark don't look all that good without them first. Yeah, look, when you I don't care who you are, you lose that many guys, right? And if people were expecting, right? Because even me, I was high on Sark's play calling, but this is why when we began the video and Chris was in here, I was talking to him about, I still didn't see Texas's expectations as being super high because I just don't think they have the subsequent pieces. And if you were expecting Sark to do what he did at Bama day 1 at Texas, that's not happening. I mean, you had a Heisman winner at wide receiver. Jalen Waddle played a few games and had 500+ yards. John Mechie, in between having the Heisman winner and Jalen Waddle doing what he did at the beginning of the season, John Mechie finishes 50, 70 yards off from 1,000. Off the top of my head, I don't remember. Najee Harris paves his way into the history books, and Mac Jones is sensational. Now, I get it, right? The offense was very good. Sark had a really good scheme at Bama, and it was Bama's scheme, but what I mean is Sark's wrinkles worked really well within Bama's scheme, right? And the Joe Moore O-line. You're 100% right, Bobby. Sark's scheme worked really well within Bama's scheme, right? The little wrinkles that he added. It fit like a glove. And I think that's because of the marriage between Kiffin and Sark ultimately, right? Like the similarities in their approach. There are differences, but at heart, they're very similar approaches. So it's going to take some time. It's going to take some time, and not having those guys is huge. Da Vinci says turning the ball over like in the Miami game. So yeah, I don't disagree, but I put that more on the offensive line, right? Like, I don't want us to get into a position where because Bryce can escape the pocket and make a play happen, that's expected every single time. The offensive line needs to give him the help that he needs, right? And that needs to be something done for sure. Blake says, I'm concerned about Bama O-line against UF defensive lines. The only real matchup that concerns me. So I don't discount that. Definitely not. Because if you go back last year and watch Florida's defensive line, they're not terrible in pass sets. They're not. In run sets, they weren't very good last year. They absolutely weren't. If you actually go back and watch that video after Alabama played Florida, and then even after Oklahoma played Florida, that's what I was talking about. They couldn't get blown off. They couldn't get blown off the ball any more than they did against Oklahoma and Alabama last year in the run sets, right? I mean, the Alabama offensive line, Oklahoma offensive line absolutely took it to Florida in that front. But now when we replace all this along the offensive line, now we're looking at a Todd Grantham defense that was horrendous last year. I'm not trying to rub salt in the wound, but let's be honest, it was. And now they want to prove something. And what better way to prove it than against Alabama, right? Bama perennially has a target on their back. And so, yeah, I think Florida will be coming out fired up, but I still, and maybe this is me being wrong, right? And I'll be the first to admit if I am wrong on this. I still don't believe in that Florida defense as a whole. I just don't. I just don't. Well, they were like they were terrible last year, just terrible. And as long as Alabama's offense is playing with some cohesion, I think that they have advantage stylistically. But it remains to be seen for sure. Yeah, Travis, I agree. I don't know that Casey would have made the difference. How do you see pretty much right like that. Blake, I think that Florida definitely has some athletes along their defensive line, no doubt. But at the end of the day, I think that there are some things that Alabama can do to mitigate that. And I think ultimately the RPO is going to be huge because as long as Alabama can continuously win the run sets up front, then they're going to lull Florida's defense, right? They're going to lull Florida's defense. They're not going to be able to send the pass rushers they want. And Alabama can just have Bryce pick them apart. You know, the one thing, and even I haven't done it in its due diligence really, is compliment Bryce on his ability to identify something at the line of scrimmage and then change it. He's had a lot of successful plays where he's changing things at the line of scrimmage, right? He's seeing things, he's changing things. That's a kid in his first year starting. It takes me back. I don't know how many of you remember this, and I might be misremembering this. If someone knows this story, please comment. If I'm not mistaken, when he was coming out of high school, the coach from Mater Dei just straight up said, we really didn't call a play when he got here. He did everything. He called all the plays. He made all the audibles. He did it all. He literally was the offensive coordinator at quarterback. So that ultimately, like, Bryce is special, man. Bryce is special. He's a really special cat, not only in his ability, but just his approach to the game. He's young, right? He's going to struggle, as all young quarterbacks do. It's only natural, but he's got ability. It's just about, can we keep him upright? OU was so far behind on the D line. We made some dudes. Yeah, for sure. But they did fairly good about. Yeah, Bobby points out the offensive line for Alabama did pretty good when they were bringing in those blitzes, just boom, 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 boom. And I think that it's first and foremost, the blitzes Manny Diaz and Miami were calling up were so transparent. The play calling from Miami in that game just wasn't very good. I always hate to be that guy because I don't like being the person who's like, oh, in hindsight, but it wasn't, right? Like, it was very telegraphed, very easy to see, and Bryce was picking it up. The line was picking it up. It was there. Travis says there's a reason Vegas put Texas at 8 wins. Yeah, for sure. So Bobby says, I think Bill O'Brien can do the same thing Sark did, coach at the highest level and did a pretty good job. Look, Bill O'Brien has got a really intriguing offensive scheme, right? Like, it would take a long time to really, really break it down. And I'm not good enough at video editing to do it, but I might have to get with somebody that's much better than I, or just teach myself it and bite the bullet and make this video. But Bill O'Brien has got a really intriguing view on the quarterback wide receiver relationship. And it all revolves around route modifications. And it's stuff that he ran at the New England Patriots at a super high level. And it all based around having the quarterback and the wide receiver be on the same page at the same time. So if the quarterback sees a position where the wide receiver is supposed to be running a slant, but the linebacker drops into coverage there, they know that they can't do that. They might have to do a zig instead. But that takes perfect relationship between the offensive line and the wide receiver. Now, when you get that perfect relationship, it is so hard to stop because everything is happening on the fly. No matter how you line up defensively, Bill O'Brien would have it called when he was in New England where every single receiver would have different route modifications based off the play. So whatever the play would be called, they'd have your base routes and they'd say, okay, well, if the guy who's lined up across from you does this, you do this or this. If he does this, you do this. In theory, it is so nice. It's so hard to stop, but it has to be executed perfectly. Because if it's not executed perfectly, you can turn the ball over very, very easily. And it's something that sometimes I don't know how much of it is implemented in the Alabama offense right now, but there was a throw in the Mercer game, right? Where it was very early in the game. It was when Alabama's offense was kind of struggling. Bryce Young threw a ball to Trayshawn Holden, and he missed him by a pretty good portion right. But if you look at the route, Trayshawn Holden took about 5 steps past the line of scrimmage and then turned around. And then he went left. Bryce threw the ball right, which makes me wonder if that was a route modification and Bryce just read that the linebacker was to Trayshawn Holden's inside, and that because of that, throwing it to the inside where Trayshawn ultimately ran wasn't the play, or if that was the route and it was just miscommunication. I don't have the answer to that, but it's something I've been wondering ever since, and I'm really now starting to watch some of these routes much closer to see, is this route modification or are we just running straight up, right? So it's really, really interesting diving into Bill O'Brien and some of his offensive stuff. Not a good GM. He's not. But as his offensive play caller, he's fantastic. I think Chris Owens was surprised at right tackle. Is Kendall Randolph still hurt, or is Dalcourse just... I don't know, Blake. I don't know. I don't know what the deal is with Dalcourt at the center position. I said this the other day. I'm just going to pretend that he is better at that center, or that the coaching staff feels like if they have Dalcourt at center, they can put that experience Owens has elsewhere and maximize the ability of the line as a whole, right? Because maybe they feel like the gap between Owens and Dalcourt is smaller than the gap between Owens and whoever would be behind him, but Owens didn't have a good showing. He didn't have a great showing this past weekend. Now, one good thing is he's at least acknowledged it. He's been talking about it on social media. And that's kind of always a great place to start. You got to do something, right? It's got to happen in practice, but to at least acknowledge it, that's something you'd like to see. So what game are y'all most looking at this week coming up that y'all would like to talk about? Because we have some rivalry games before I hop out. And by the way, for everybody in here, tonight at around 10 o'clock, I'm going to be on Indy Sooners channel. We're going to be doing a live with a former scout in the NFL. That's going to be a ton of fun. I cannot wait to do that. So y'all go check out Indy Sooners channel. If you don't know him, great Oklahoma Sooners content, up and comer on YouTube. He was live streaming with me last week for the channel's first live stream. Really good dude. Really, really good guy. Absolutely worth the subscription. Absolutely worth the subscription. We're going to be having a great conversation about that tonight. Auburn versus PSU. Yeah. That's a game. That's a great game. Because at this point right now, we have Auburn coming out this year and playing with really high confidence. But who is Auburn? We don't really know yet. And I'm not trying to be rude. We just don't know yet. They really haven't played an opponent that is really solid. And this week, they get to go up against Penn State. And the interesting thing is when we look at Penn State, I said in the video earlier, I cannot in good conscience rank Ohio State above Penn State right now. Penn State looks pretty darn good. And they have a ranked win. Ohio State doesn't. And Minnesota is not that good. Minnesota barely squeaks by Miami of Ohio. I was thinking maybe that Minnesota was better than we expected. And the reason I thought maybe Minnesota was better than we expected is because last year on average, they averaged 20 to 25 guys out a game due to COVID protocols. That's impossible to win in that scenario. I thought that maybe we were looking at a team that is figuring things out, that would have a slow start in Minnesota. That doesn't look to be the case. It doesn't. And so Penn State Auburn is a really, really good game. It's one that I cannot wait to see, because I do believe that we're going to see some interesting things. Auburn is going to show us who they are, and ultimately Penn State will show us who they are. So it's going to be a really, really good game. We have Cincy, Indiana. Cincy, Indiana. So earlier in the video I picked out Cincy, and I was saying this is a team that is really in an interesting position right now. And they are. This week they have Indiana. Indiana got beat week 1 by Iowa, and then Iowa turns around and beats Iowa State. Now, in hindsight, Iowa State doesn't look that great right now. They just don't. But Indiana rebounded. Indiana rebounded this week. They looked pretty good. And so Cincinnati is now in a position where they get to play Indiana, and then next week they get Notre Dame. Notre Dame has struggled against Florida State and then against the team they played last week, Toledo, right? Squeaking by both of those. But at the same time, if you're Cincinnati and you down Indiana and then you down Notre Dame, you are looking at a wide open conversation. I mean, that's when things just go crazy, right? So that Cincy, Indiana, Eric, great pick right there. Great pick right there. Weston asked, do I think OU's offensive line will handle Nebraska's defensive line? Look, Nebraska's defense isn't that bad. Nebraska's pretty bad, but their defense has some redeeming qualities. I'm not saying it's a great defense. Let's make no mistake about it, but they do have some redeeming qualities. Oklahoma has got to stay disciplined, and ultimately they cannot put themselves in a position where they know what's coming. If we go all the way back to Nebraska's first game, when Nebraska was in that game and they were able to telegraph, is this a run? Is this a pass? Their pass rush was teeing off. It was really teeing off, but that was only when they were able to telegraph what was coming. The second they lost control of that game and the defense wasn't able to telegraph anymore, that went out the window, right? So that's on Riley and them to keep that defensive line soft, keep them off balance. What do I mean when I say soft? So that's part of the lingo I use that probably doesn't make much sense. But when I say that they need to soften up the defense, if I'm Nebraska right now, I'd expect Oklahoma to put the ball on the edges, get it in their playmakers' hands, really soften me up at the front so that I'm thinking, okay, well, I need to spread out. And then they're going to hit me over the top. They're going to hit me up the gut, and they're going to make me pay. And then I have nothing, right? Because now I can't stop the outside. I can't stop the inside. So I'd want to keep Oklahoma in a position to where I'm taking away something. I'm not letting them up the middle. I'm not letting them to the outside. But you got to pick something. Bill B is a great offensive line coach for Oklahoma, and I expect him to have that unit ready. Rame? Is he good to go? Right? If he's good to go, I think offensive line for Oklahoma, it'll be a test. It'll be a test, but one that I think Oklahoma should overcome. Absolutely. Bama, Florida, the next game is the only one that matters. Hey, I don't disagree with you at all. Da Vinci. Bama, Florida is interesting. Bama is coming off of a week where they had a slow start and Nick Saban warned us about rat poison. Now, here's the interesting thing. They got fired up after that game by Saban, right? In the post-game press conference. They got fired up heading into that game by Saban. If history is to repeat itself, and we know what Saban does with motivation, I'd expect a motivated Alabama against Florida. I would expect a very motivated Alabama against Florida. It's opening SEC play for Alabama. I would not expect them to take anything lightly, especially when Florida has Dan Mullen and now they're going to have two athletic quarterbacks, and you don't really know what their offense is going to look like. I mean, I say that. We have an idea, at least, of the kind of style they're going to approach this with. But we don't know if it's going to be mainly Emory Jones. We don't know if it's going to be mainly Anthony Richardson. Right. So I think Alabama comes ready to play. I think it'll be a good game. But at the end of the day, Grantham's defense was still really bad. And I just don't have faith that they went from really bad to really good. I don't. So as long as Alabama can keep them off balance, have success running the ball, I think Alabama should get that victory. Bobby asked, Caleb Williams makes me feel confident in our backup. Who does Bama have? So Bama has two different guys we can roll out at backup right now. Paul Tyson, the great-grandson of Bear Bryant, and then Jalen Milroe, who was the #1 quarterback in the state of Texas this past year. Jalen Milroe, if you see him just without his pads, he's built like a safety. And he does not look like a freshman. I mean, that kid has muscles coming out of his muscles. He still needs to develop, but, I mean, the ceiling on him is really, really high. Really, really, really high. So Alabama does have some quarterbacks at that second string position, but Bryce is the same consistency would be a fall off, especially if there's questions at offensive line, because Bryce's mobility allows us to mitigate that. So it's going to be interesting. Someone says Indiana's not good like everyone thought last year. Indiana was a fluke. Yeah, I don't think Indiana might be as good as everyone thought, but I still think they're a solid team, right? Like, take that how you will. You think Cincy's going to blow Indiana out? They might. I mean, they got an athletic quarterback. It's going to be very interesting to see. It'll be very interesting to see. Great to see Michigan State doing good. I agree. Bobby asks, Okay, yeah, that was the someone asked Caleb Williams or Spencer Rattler. So right now, I mean, look, Caleb Williams is a guy who has a ton of ceiling to him. Ton of ceiling. But he doesn't have experience, right? And it's one thing to have a bunch of ceiling, a bunch of hype. It's another thing to have a bunch of talent and experience. Rattler's a really talented quarterback. He is his own worst enemy. There's no doubt about that. But at the end of the day, he's a really talented quarterback that ultimately gets this system. He understands what it is Lincoln Riley wants to do. He and Caleb are different quarterbacks, but Caleb's a kid I'm very interested in seeing how he continues to progress, how his passing continues to progress. He's a really interesting prospect coming out of high school, 5-star, really, really highly rated. But, I'm really interested to see how he continues to progress as a quarterback under Lincoln Riley and them. But as of right now, as much as I think that, Caleb Williams is great, I think that right now you go with Spencer Rattler. He has the experience. He knows the system. He has just the relationship with the receivers. So that's why ultimately, I nod with Rattler right now. Caleb Williams has a really high ceiling, though. Really high ceiling. I'm very interested in seeing how he does. Eric says Helton should have been fired 4 years ago. I don't necessarily disagree with you there. I don't. It hasn't looked good. And I have to wonder, I ultimately have to wonder how much has recruiting kind of saved him right now? Not saying they've had world beating recruiting classes, but how much has some of the battles they've been in saved his job to this point? I don't know, but you landed the number one player in the nation. You've got 2 5-stars a part of this class. Whether they keep them or not, I don't know. But it's something to think about. For sure. He's a better prospect, but Rattler's further along in development and system. Yeah, I agree. Rattler needs to get it together, though. He does. He's his own worst enemy. Quarterback spotlight, and I talked about it. He has to learn how to fail. Sometimes when you're that talented and you can get away with terrible form and terrible technique and make it work. For instance, the little jump back throw Rattler does, where he'll be in his drop and he'll just do like a fadeaway for no reason. Sometimes there's pressure coming on him, and when he does it, when there's pressure coming on him, at least there's a reason why he does it. I don't mind that. I would rather you keep your feet set, but at least there's a reason. Sometimes he does it just because he has the ability to do it. But just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean you should. So, Da Vinci says, my concern is I think Mullen will have both quarterbacks in at once. QB2 could take a pitch and run. Yeah, so here's the thing. When you have these 2 quarterback systems, it's why I asked the question in that last Oklahoma video, do you think that we could see a package with Caleb on the field? Now the defense has to choose. But the hard part is it could reasonably be either. Is it a run? Is it a pass? Who knows? It's going to be interesting to see how they scheme, but I think at the end of the day, I don't believe you can rely on one thing and beat Alabama. I think you have to be good at a lot of things. I think you have to get Alabama off balance. And if Florida's hoping that they can just simply run the ball all day to beat Alabama, it might be a long game. But at the same time, if you can employ something with your quarterbacks to really take advantage of some aggressiveness, to get some, discipline gone out the game, you could be successful. Absolutely. Eric says USC needs a bigger name than Fickle to rebuild everything. Oh, that's tough. That's tough. Because I hear where you're coming from, and I think I get the logic ultimately that you're employing there. But Fickle's a great coach. I think it would depend, right? How much excitement is he generating at Cincinnati? Right? If you're talking to recruits and they're interested, that might be something. You just need somebody that's going to make kids want to stay. You just need somebody. I mean, I pointed it out earlier. When you look across college football right now, the starting quarterback of Ohio State, the starting quarterback of Ole Miss, when he's not injured, the starting quarterback of Georgia, the starting quarterback of Alabama, the starting quarterback of Clemson, all from California. All of them. And when we look at DJU and Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, they all came out at the same time. DJU and Bryce Young are some of the top-rated quarterback prospects in the modern era of recruiting. Both of them, right? I mean, like top-rated guys. I think Bryce Young is a top 10 quarterback in the modern era of recruiting. DJU's a top 15 quarterback in the modern era of recruiting. And CJ Stroud, in the same year as both of those guys, won the Elite 11 MVP. None of them are at USC. You cannot lose those battles. You might not get every kid in your state. That's so hard. But you can't lose every kid in your state. So that's the one I'm really just, that's crazy that they fired Helton. That's something we're going to have to keep an eye on for sure. For sure. Absolutely. Well, everybody, that's just about it. I think the last game I'll kind of hit on before we close here, that Tulane Ole Miss game. Really interested in hearing from y'all because that's going to be an exciting game, right? Tulane's better than we expect. Ole Miss at least rolled out a defense that sniffed at physicality against Louisville. Looked like they knew how to tackle, which was a good thing to see. So Ole Miss Tulane game I'm very much well looking forward to. Ole Miss went out there and slaughtered Austin Peay. That's what they should do. I mean, that's what we expect. That's going to be a really, really good game for us this weekend. College football, man. What a year. What a year. We've already had top 5 teams drop. 2 top 5 teams, Clemson, Ohio State. I mean, we've had upsets. We've had, you name it. LSU dropped to UCLA. UCLA's running game looks phenomenal. I mean, they look great. Oregon upsets Ohio State. Arkansas beats Texas. It's been a fantastic year thus far for college football, and we're on week 3. We're on week 3. This is a huge week. Throughout this week, I'm going to be doing previews of the games. So y'all just stop by the channel, drop the games you want to see. I'll be talking about them. I'm going to be on tonight, like I said, at the Indy Sooners channel. Y'all go subscribe to him. He's a super good dude, really good at OU content, up and comer. If you love college football, he's absolutely worth somebody checking out because good dude, knows his stuff. He's up and comer. We're going to be talking to a former NFL scout tonight. So that's going to be a really fun conversation at around 10 o'clock. So if you're up, go to Indy Sooners channel, drop that subscribe, watch the video. That's going to be a lot of fun. I really, 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 really excited for that. That's going to be a good time. And also let me know when the best time to stream is. I'm thinking Mondays and Fridays. We're going to do 2 streams a week. One to talk about the week in review, one to talk about the week to come. You know, Monday we'll mix it in. We'll very heavily talk about the weekend, what games, talk to y'all, have a lot of fun. I'm going to be having guests on. I'm going to be seeing what I can't get it from there. So really had a good time. These are awesome. Let me know if y'all think Friday is a good time. Let me know in the comments where, you know, what time you think Friday, what time works best for y'all. Because I want to do them twice a week, at least, probably more than that as we get the season going. Just some random live streams, probably Sunday. Da Vinci, you're right. LSU does have problems. LSU has a lot of problems. And at the point where your head coach is a offensive line guy and your offensive line, I mean, not even an offensive line guy. I'm sorry. That's wrong. At the point where your head coach is a trenches guy and you lose the battle of the trenches, I don't know what to do. Right. I don't know. And it all boils back. Like, this is a can of worms I could talk hours about, but LSU absolutely has problems right now. And if they don't have some success, Coach O's seat is getting warm, very warm, very, very warm. But that's it from me. Thank y'all. Thank y'all all for coming in. It was a great time. I'll see y'all Friday and I'll see y'all throughout the week. Drop comments down on the video. I do what I can to respond to comments whenever I have the time to talk with y'all. Really enjoy the interaction. Have a ton of fun doing this, but I'll be live tonight on Indy Sooners channel, live Friday. So see y'all then. Thanks for stopping by. That's it.